wrote, "And he brought you to me one by one, sincere boys and girls, to be trained in Krishna consciousness. Now I can see that it is a miracle. Otherwise, one old man with only a few books to sell for barely getting food, how could he survive, what to speak of introducing a God-conscious movement in a materialistic society?" For Bhaktivedanta Swami, these are happy days. Singing and speaking with the vigor of a young man, he brings the Hare Krishna movement into the public eye by chanting in the parks, by distributing Back to Godhead magazine, by holding free Sunday love feasts. Many are attracted. His hopes for the future expand without limit. The Hare Krishna movement has taken root.
Sometime in the spring of 1967, people handed me clippings from New York newspapers saying that there was a Swami in New York City. So I went to New York to look up this person and his movement. My first contact was with disciples apart from Bhaktivedanta Swami, and I was frankly somewhat disappointed by the disciples. They seemed to be not very informed about what they were doing. They were unclear about the whole thing. And yet they were terribly serious and terribly devoted to what they were about. And I couldn't put those two pieces together. You know, their confusion, uncertainty on the one hand, and their commitment on the other, until I met Bhaktivedanta Swami. And as soon as I met him, which was after several visits to the temple, I realized that this was the person who really made the whole thing go. But the impressive thing about that was he was never himself in the center. He never said, "You should do this because of me." He always said, "You should do this, and I should do this because of Krishna." When he gave them instructions to do what they thought were impossible things, like he told one of the early disciples, "Go start a magazine." The guy had never had any contact with a magazine before in his life except to read one. And he said, "How am I to do that?" And Bhaktivedanta Swami said, "Krishna will help you." He was just astonishing in terms of the personal impact that he had on people, the way that he was able to give them confidence in themselves, but more importantly, give them confidence that there was a guide who was leading them and would give them the strength that they needed.
Bhaktivedanta Swami does not belong to New York. He belongs to Krishna. So when a few of his followers invite him to San Francisco, he goes and introduces the freewheeling youth to Krishna, his ancient culture, his spiritual food, his eternal chant, the way to stay high forever. In the heart of the hippie movement, Haight-Ashbury, Golden Gate Park, and in the hearts of the hippies, the Hare Krishna mantra resounds with unimagined potency. As in New York, Bhaktivedanta Swami gathers sincere followers. The Hare Krishna movement begins to grow. Bhaktivedanta Swami becomes respectfully known as Prabhupada, meaning one at whose feet the masters sit. From Montreal, Prabhupada sends 6 disciples to open a temple in London. Yamuna Devi Dasi remembers.
So we went to London that fall, and although we had no permanent place of residence and we were completely dependent on Krishna, somehow or another, by the enthusiasm that Srila Prabhupada had given us in Montreal, we were able to make contact with George Harrison, who was a member of the Beatles at the time. And he was such a pleasant person to be with. He so much appreciated the Hare Krishna mantra that he immediately said, "Let's make a 45 record." So we'd cut a record, and he was very pleased with it, did a little background music on it, And it was released, and Apple organized tours for us. We went to Germany and France and had television coverage. And in this way, the London Times wanted to do, the Sunday Times wanted to do a feature on us. And we were able to send the report back to Srila Prabhupada with the headlines, "Krishna Consciousness Startles London."
As people come to him, convinced of the Krishna conscious philosophy, Srila Prabhupada accepts them for initiation, not on the basis of birth, as in the rigid Hindu caste system, but on the basis of qualification and sincerity. In the whole history of Indian spiritual life, no one has ever attempted something as bold and seemingly impossible, to transform Westerners into full-fledged devotees of Lord Krishna. But by his intense spiritual energy and compassion, Srila Prabhupada is successful beyond his own expectations.
How old is the movement?
But from historical point of view, it is about 5,000 years old.
Why has it just begun to really catch on in the Western world? I mean, just recently, in recent years, has it begun to sweep the Western world? Why is this?
The Western world, the younger generation were being frustrated with the hippie movement. So, when they saw something tangible, they accepted it.
What things would, if everyone in the United States believed in Krishna to the extent that you do, what would happen to this country? How would it be transformed?
They'll be very happy and peaceful. There will be no more hippies.
What would you describe as a hippie? Someone who smokes?
You know better than me. Something extraordinary.
The thing that really inspired me the most about Srila Prabhupada was his complete dedication to his devotees. The thing that Prabhupada liked the best was to be with his disciples. It wasn't that he took on large amounts of disciples and then sat back and then just pushed them to do this and that and the other for himself. He did more for us than we ever did for him. And traveling with him personally, I got to see what a tremendous sacrifice he made for us. But even when he was ill, he would still preach. He would still be concerned. He would still be asking after how things were going in the society that he created, how were individual disciples doing. He always had time also to look to our personal needs. He was very concerned. Prabhupada wasn't aloof. All he really wanted was us to reciprocate the love that he gave to us. And if we reciprocated, he would give us more. So my personal experience with Srila Prabhupada was that I found in him a person that I could actually genuinely, fully give myself to.
In Srila Prabhupada's eyes, Krishna consciousness is not an armchair philosophy or a part-time religion. It is a way of life, a transcendental culture that can end man's political, economic, and social problems. To realize his vision, Srila Prabhupada circles the globe 14 times in 12 years, inspiring his followers and discussing Krishna consciousness with all interested persons. His door is open to everyone.
Actually, nothing is private property. Everything belongs to God. Rather, we have stolen God's property and claiming my property. Then in Australia, the Englishman came here, but is that the property of the Englishman? It was there. America, it was there. And when everything will be finished, it will be there. In the middle we come and claim, it is my property and fight.
To revive the Krishna conscious tradition in its full richness, Prabhupada envisions God-centered, self-sufficient farm communities based on the principle of plain living and high thinking. The first such community begins on 133 acres in the hills of West Virginia. Prabhupada calls it New Vrindavan, after Krishna's place of pastimes in India. In 1972, Srila Prabhupada begins a Krishna-conscious primary school system in Dallas, Texas.
Srila Prabhupada very practically introduced a primary school system to teach children self-realization along with regular studies. This means that the Gurukul system is unique in that the educators are themselves free of vices. We could hardly find an institution where the faculty members are free of loose sexual relationships, intoxication, smoking, although they may have good credentials academically. That would be rare to find. But in Krishna consciousness, the teacher must also be on a platform of pure devotional service, because the children are very impressionable and they'll learn whatever their educators are actually doing, not just what they're saying. So these were some of the principles that Srila Prabhupada introduced in Gurukula.
Srila Prabhupada gradually trains his disciples in the time-honored tradition of deity worship to help them advance spiritually. He explains, "I have introduced this system of deity worship among the non-believers, the atheists. Krishna cannot be understood with our present senses, but by his kindness he agrees to personally appear as the deity to accept our service. When we are attracted to the beautiful form of the deity, we will forget our attraction for material things. And as we serve the deity, we will develop pure love of God. Then our lives will be successful." In Melbourne, Australia, Srila Prabhupada worships Lord Chaitanya, a divine incarnation of Krishna.
By Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, we have installed the deity here in your country. You are very fortunate that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to your country to teach you how you become free of all anxieties. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Everyone is full of anxiety, but everyone can be free from all the anxieties if he follows the path chalked out by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As people are followed in this age, the method also has been offered very simply. They have been recommended simply to chant the holy name of God. That's all.
For 5 years after first arriving in America, Srila Prabhupada presents Krishna consciousness primarily to Westerners, from housewives to hippies to heads of state. Then in November 1971, after a world tour, he returns to Delhi with some of his followers. The mayor receives him with the fanfare that greets a homecoming patriot. Prabhupada quotes Lord Chaitanya, "It is the duty of those born in India to benefit others by spreading Krishna consciousness. This is India's greatest glory, her unique gift to the world." 30,000 Indians gather nightly at the Delhi fairgrounds to see the Western devotees and hear Prabhupada speak.
To bring about this change in India, that the revival of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada's plan was to bring his dancing white elephants. He told us that when I bring my Western disciples to India, they will all come to see my dancing white elephants, he said. So we were actually very fond of being Prabhupada's dancing white elephants. We took that as our the special mercy of Prabhupada on us, that we could be his dancing white elephants and help him in any way we could to preach Krishna consciousness in India. Prabhupada was told by an astrologer in Navadip in West Bengal that when he saw Prabhupada's face, a photo of Prabhupada, he said, this man, he has the ability to make a house in which the whole world can live peacefully. To make a house in which the whole world can live very peacefully. And when I told Prabhupada that, he said, yes, that is my mission, that within Krishna consciousness, the whole world can live peacefully.
While the Hare Krishna movement spreads worldwide, Srila Prabhupada wants to nurture its roots in India. He journeys to Mayapur, West Bengal, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. It was Lord Chaitanya who inaugurated, 500 years ago, the congregational chanting of God's holy names. In Mayapur, devotees purchase a small tract of land and start constructing an international guest house. For a handful of devotees who know nothing about construction, this is not an easy task. Srila Prabhupada directs and encourages them. For ourselves, he says, we are happy and satisfied living in a grass hut. But if we simply have a hut, who will come here? The more we develop our land, the more people will be attracted. Prabhupada plans to build a temple of understanding to house the world's largest planetarium, and around it, a spiritual city with schools, shops, farms, and many temples for worshiping Lord Krishna. Within the hearts of India's people is a natural respect for the eternal Krishna-conscious culture. Many come forward to take part in Srila Prabhupada's movement and accept initiation from him. No one should go hungry within a 10-mile radius of the temple, Prabhupada instructs. In March 1972, devotees start the ISKCON Food Relief Program, distributing prasad, vegetarian food offered to Lord Krishna. As the Mayapur project develops, Prabhupada invites his disciples from 6 continents to join together yearly on the anniversary of Lord Chaitanya's appearance. Prabhupada wants them to be purified and inspired by remembrance of the Lord in his holy land. In Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada treats his followers to a guided tour of the holy places and personally relates Lord Krishna's pastimes. The devotees relish a bath in the sacred waters of the Yamuna River. Prabhupada acquires land in Bombay, India's most cosmopolitan city.